when you were running the record store, you said, like, we got to have a cafe, right? You put in the cafe, and that I'm sure that improved your cash flow and brought a lot of people in. Well, otherwise, might not have. Well, either way, at some point it did, and the food there is now wonderful and cleverly named, and all of that. I love everything about it.
The cafe was because at the time there wasn't really any place to go for breakfast other than the Charleston up the road,
right?
Webster's down the road, but I didn't have time to get in my car or skateboard and go to those places. I was stuck at the store all the time. So created it for selfish reasons, strong coffee and thick bacon. And I knew if I could accomplish those two things,
you still have those.
Then you have, the qualities of a great diner. The idea came about when I was on a ski trip, and I had gotten snow struck in Taos, New Mexico, and ended up having to drive back rather than fly back. Oh. And as I drove back, I went through, Colorado and Utah and, all these great ski towns. It ended up becoming had I waited a couple of days, of course, I could have just flown back, but it turned out to be the greatest solo ski trip I've ever had. And I ended up coming through Montana and into Idaho and through some valley and Crystal Mountain, and everywhere I went was just these great breakfast burritos and huevos, rancheros, and ski food. Hearty but healthy. And it came out of that, but also because my roommate at the time, I lived here on 47th with my roommate Pat Tunison, who was the chef at the Space Needle. Yes. Pat kind of gave me the inspiration, the confidence that I could pull it off, and we created some of the early recipes together: the Hank Williams omelet, the Woody Guthrie Farmer's omelet, the Easy Rider sandwich, the Johnny Cash Special, steak and eggs, the Dolly Parton stack, of course. Those were some of the early ones. And he was our chef there for the first year. And although he was doing a fantastic job, the business just wasn't there.
Really?
And I couldn't afford, a quality chef like that. The record store was funding the cafe, and I wasn't sure that it was actually going to make it. This would have been 98, 99, into 2000. The first 3 years, we were losing about $4 or $5 grand a month.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it didn't. And I contemplated. I remember sitting outside with my buddy Gary Mortensen across the street for hours on taking out the kitchen and just converting it to one big record store. Because that's what I knew.
Exactly.
And it wasn't successful. And then something happened. Well, it just clicked. It became a place for artists and rock stars to hang out. It wasn't that busy. So you'd have Chris Cornell and Susan sitting there. You'd have Eddie sitting there, and like I'd said earlier, Brandi Carlile, and it just became more of a good, eclectic, eccentric place. No different than like the early Mars Bar or Cyclops, in Belltown,
Sure.
Where it was too odd and weird for the casual, customer. People would look in and be like, a cafe, diner, and a record shop. Well, I don't get it. Yeah. Take one step in and walk back out. It's doing good. It's great for events. I think we've. When it comes to in-stores and events, we're at an all-time high. And a lot of that is because we're piggybacking the bar or vice versa.
That's great.
So a family can come in there. It's all ages. And, you can get your drink on, but you can also have your kids running around.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it feels more like a real venue than just an in-store anymore. I mean, anyone that was at Head and Heart a couple of weeks ago would tell you that was a real show. And, of course, in the early days of the in-stores, I used to do that. Before I had the cafe, it was really just a social club that was kind of locked out to the public. Mm-hmm. And I had boxing bags and a basketball hoop in the old Joe's Grill Easy Street Cafe space. Yeah. And that's where I first had Mudhoney perform, and a handful of other acts. And I was just throwing out beers. I mean, it was the Wild Wild West back then. I didn't know you needed a license for any of that.